Welcome to Trade and Tariff Tuesdays. We're back with another edition of Avalara's webinar series discussing the Trump administration's tariffs and their impact on trade compliance. We started this weekly series back in February, so if this is your first time, welcome. If you've joined us before, welcome back. Just a friendly reminder that Avalara cannot provide legal or tax advice. On your screen is our safe harbor policy. Please take a moment to review. We're recording today's event, and you'll receive the recording later today. The console you're looking at can be customized. Feel free to move or resize the windows. The additional resources section contains a lot of great related resources, including the slide deck. And there are several ways to engage with presenters and attendees. First, if you have any questions, please submit them using the Ask a Question box. We'll save time for Q&A at the end of the presentation and may also do that throughout the presentation today. You can also submit troubleshooting questions in the Q&A box. Second, you can join our attendee chat. Click the icon at the bottom of your screen with 2 chat bubbles. The attendee chat will appear. We encourage you to introduce yourself, network, and discuss today's topic. Third, you can react to the presentation by clicking on the emoji icon and reacting. Last, today's webinar continues on with the 45-minute format to have more time for audience Q&A. And since this session is less than an hour intended to be interactive and responsive, it is not eligible for CPE credit. Just a reminder, or to let you know that Crush is on tour. We just had our first session of Crush on Tour in Chicago last week. And our speakers will tell you a little bit about that. But you can check for the remaining dates at events.avalara.com. All right, just a reminder on when we will be meeting next for Trade and Tariff Tuesdays. Will actually be July 10th for a special Thursday edition. So that is following July 9th and all of the announcements that we're looking forward to. And just a note that we will not be meeting the week of July 4th. All right, let's take a moment and meet our presenters today from Avalara. We have Craig Reed, General Manager of Cross Border, and Patrick Frith, Senior Director of Growth Cross Border. All right, I'm going to pass it over to Craig to get us started.
Thanks, Regina, and welcome back, everyone. For those, I know there's a lot of you who attend these weekly, and thank you very much for your attendance. We really appreciate it. And for any of you that are new, hopefully this is helpful for you. As Regina mentioned, we just did Crush, and I wasn't there, Patrick wasn't there, but we did talk to some colleagues who were there, and we got a lot of consistent feedback on just the confusion in the market about where they're going to source supply, how they're going to deal with duties and taxes, and embedding those costs into their customers, what's coming down the pike in terms of changes to tariffs and how that might affect their businesses. So I think that, well, we'll go through the poll questions, and if you're experiencing that, you're definitely not alone. So there's a lot going on. And of course, the news cycle's changed a little bit. Obviously, the Middle East drama has definitely taken over the news cycle. There's been a little less trade and tariff news coming out, but there still is a lot to talk about. So let's get into it. We do a poll question first, as any of you that are attending again realize. So let's do our first poll question. The EU recently said that they would be willing to accept a final tariff on exports into the US of what percentage? So I'll go to the results there, or the poll question where you can actually enter your answer. So this is, this is one of the preludes, I guess, to any announcement that may occur with the EU. That's probably the next big one, right? The EU to come in. Let's go to the next. All right, well, most of you have it right. It is 10%. So the EU has said we'd be willing to accept 10%. I think there were conditions on that, though. That they get some breaks on cars and other things that they were concerned about. So we'll see what happens with that. Let's get into the latest news here, Patrick, on what's going on. And you're in the UK talking to customers again. We were just in Patrick and I just got back from Rome, where we were at WMX Europe. A lot of discussions about trade and tariffs, obviously, and we continue to travel around the world and talk to customers about all this stuff, right?
That's right. Yeah. So I'm in the UK. We have a tariff dinner tonight with some customers to discuss over dinner implications and what other businesses are doing. Tomorrow I'm in Birmingham, where I'm visiting with a customer to go through a town hall, basically, to go through these tariff turbulent times. So, okay. We are 15 days away from the end of the pause. So July the 9th is coming fast. It seems like a lifetime ago when we were on the Rose Garden proclaiming Liberation Day. You can see, as a reminder, you can see on the left-hand side, not all, but the big country impacts from Liberation Day and the announcement on Liberation Day. The first digit is what the US perceives to be the tariffs that US companies are paying for their products going into those respective countries. And Liberation Day, if you remember, called for that number to be halved as a reciprocal to what the US perceived to be the tariff imposed on US goods. So that is where we stand. Now, we know the UK has done a deal. The framework is there. We haven't seen all the details, but there was a big announcement, if you remember, at the G7 in Canada. So the UK would appear to have solved their problem. But I'm not hearing, none of us are hearing anything about closure other than the poll question that we just had, the EU doing a counter proposal. So we can only imagine over the next few days, the White House is working with countries all over the world to establish what this orange column will look like on the 9th. Will it get paused again? That's another possibility, but we're just going to have to wait and see. On the right-hand side here, you see what else was announced on Liberation Day. The non-USMCA compliant goods from Canada, 25%, 10% on non-compliant for energy and potash. Steel and aluminum, we all know about that, 25% from everywhere. And then you see the automobiles, semiconductors, so on and so forth. So that is where we stand today. Remember, there is also a 3-month pause on China. Now, that did not start on the same day as the rest of the world pause. That's running about 4 or 5 weeks behind. So we are expecting a final, or the pause will be lifted on China early August. So that's where we are, 15 days away from the pause coming off. Craig?
So yeah, just to kind of summarize it by country and by region, because they've kind of gone into buckets, haven't they? So China, it's 30% on the majority of Chinese imports, except for the Section 301 tariffs, which remain fully in effect. They've also ended the duty-free de minimis treatment. We're going to talk a bit more about that. There are some Section 301 tariff exclusions. I think there's 164 products that applies to. So when you kind of mash that together, you end up with 55% for China. So that's 10% baseline, which everybody gets, 20% fentanyl-linked exports, and then 25% for Section 301. So you're at 55% right now for China. Notable on China, the U.S. has opened the door that if they are quote-unquote satisfied with the progress on fentanyl, that the 20% fentanyl component could be lifted. So that would leave China with 35%. So we'll see what ends up happening there, but that's where we stand with China right now. Canada and Mexico, nothing's really changed for Canada and Mexico. I'm sure the Canadians were very pleased that the UK announced their tariff deal with the US on Canadian soil. But be that as it may, for Canada and Mexico right now, any USMCA compliant goods, so they have to qualify for USMCA. There are specific rules around that. That'll be at a 0% tariff. Anything that's non-USMCA is at 25%. So for Canada, that's about 60% of the goods. For Mexico, it's about 50%. And then for Canada, there's a bit of a break on energy and potash, which is difficult for the US to source from anywhere else. For everybody else, sort of blankets, there's the 10% blanket for all countries that went into effect on April 5th. 50% increase, it increased from 25 to 50% on steel and aluminum, which went into effect June 4th. Automobiles, 25% on countries that buy oil and gas from Venezuela, which, again, we don't know how they do that. And then obviously the UK has the 10% deal, and the steel and aluminum tariffs are removed. So it's 10% basically for everything from the UK. So the UK has got the best deal in the world right now, actually. The US proposed 50% on all EU imports. That's paused until July 9th, along with everything else. And as we mentioned before in the poll, the EU is prepared to accept 10%. So we'll see what ends up happening there. From a reciprocal standpoint, China has 10% on the majority of US imports right now. Canada has 25% on about $60 billion worth of goods. And the EU, not on here, but the EU has announced that they're preparing, if they can't come up with a deal, reciprocal tariffs on around $90 billion worth of goods, I believe it is. So when you get this presentation, we'll have a link. That link actually on the slide is hot. So you'll be able to go to our overview of all the tariffs and where we stand now. So that's just a bit of a snapshot that we wanted to take you through. The other big piece of news, just from an impact to China especially, is the end of de minimis for goods that are origin China or Hong Kong. Remember again that it is country of origin; it's not country of shipment. So regardless of where it ships from, if it's made in China or it's made in Hong Kong, it's now subject to duties, applicable duties at $0. So for non-postal shipments, that's just all the applicable duties, the 55%. Under $800 postal shipments is 54% of value, or $100 a package. And there's also reporting requirements. So, before they kind of slid through on, there wasn't a lot of reporting required. Now they are actual formal entries, and they require HS codes. We're going to talk about that in a second. The other interesting point of note on de minimis is that in the One Big Beautiful Bill, President Trump, and this is actually a bipartisan move, that the de minimis in general has been bipartisan. It hasn't been specific to the Republicans. They have announced that they want to remove de minimis entirely for all countries effective July 1st, 2027. So that would have an impact as well. Patrick, any thoughts on that one? Big change, right?
Yeah, enormous. When I think about my household in California, we, like everybody else, we order online whatever we need for the house, for the kids, and it's staggering when you think, because everything's under $800, right? That we import. We're not paying duties. We're not paying. It comes in through the de minimis channels. So once that is eliminated, and then those tariffs, whatever ends up being negotiated after the pause, they're applied to it. It's going to change my expenses at a household level, and that's not me. That's 250 million households in the US, right? So yeah, it's going to have a big impact for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Let's talk about some of the implications to your business and things you need to think about. We like to call it the four puzzle pieces, the four horsemen of global trade. There are four really important components that you need to think about. We just talked about de minimis exemption. So every country globally has different de minimis levels. Here in Canada, it's $20, except there's some exceptions to that, but basically starts at $20. Other countries are different. Country of origin. So again, country of origin does not mean where it was shipped from, and we're going to talk a bit more about that. So country of origin is very, very important. The third component, which is probably the most important, is your tariff code classification. This is really the Rosetta Stone of global trade. It's really what all governments use as the basis for the rules that they apply, the duties, the taxes, the restrictions. Tariff codes are consistent for every country up to 6 digits. However, every country adds between 3 and 6 more digits, typically 4. So you have a 10-digit code that describes the good. Those tariff codes are vitally important that you get right. So the intersection, if you think of a table, the intersection of the tariff code is the row, and the country of origin, where it was made, is the column. The cell is the duty rate. So that's really important. And then the other element that you need to be aware of is the declared value. So obviously that percentage, that duty rate, applies to the declared value of the good. And messing with any of these things can get you in a lot of trouble. And in fact, the CBP has been posting on LinkedIn, and this is actually in the middle pane there. You can see what the CBP has said. The country of origin is where product was made, processed, or assembled. In other words, where most of the value of the good was added. The point of origin is where the product is currently located. So there's been, and the CBP is aware of, a lot of schemes where shippers are trying to ship through third-party countries to mask the country of origin being China. So the CBP is very aware of this. And if you are caught doing this, you can see the risks there. And they put it out there on LinkedIn: steep fines, seizure of your inventory, business disruption, loss of import privileges, so they can actually prevent you from importing, or criminal charges. So folks, be very, very aware of this. The CBP is aware of all of these different schemes to try to get around declared value of goods, country of origin, changing HS codes to get into lower duty rates. All of these things, those four components, make sure you get it right, because the CBP is aware and they are monitoring.
Just to add, Craig, there's going to be, there already is transshipping through third countries, as you mentioned, and global trade supply chains are very, very visible. So it won't take much for CBP to figure out shipments that are moving from China to that third country, spending a short period of time in that third country, and then making its journey onto the US. There'll be a list of worst offending countries, I'm sure, which will then be under the spotlight. And when you're under the administration spotlight, that's not where you want to be, because that you may lose your trade deal privileges. There'll be a constant scrutiny on shipments from that country, which just delays supply chains and all the rest of it. So, it cannot be encouraged. And certainly we advise our customers to do not do this, because you get found out.
Yeah, and actually we're talking about this in Rome, weren't we, at WMX Asia, or pardon me, at WMX Europe, and the CBP can say, prove it. So in other words, you claim country of origin Vietnam, they think it's transshipped from China through Vietnam, and you're claiming Vietnam as country of origin. They can ask you to prove it, and proving it is not trivial. So, if they suspect something's going on, which they're aware of all these different schemes, as we said. So be very aware of that. And anyway, I think I hammered that home. But CBP.
It's a very good point.
Yeah, CBP has posted this. I think this is maybe the third or fourth one I've seen them post. So there's obviously a lot of it going on, and just don't want anyone on the webinar to get caught in that net. There's been a lot of impacts, hasn't there, on what's happened with the deficit and changes in good flows, etc. So yeah.
So we've seen the latest results, and once we get fresh results, we'll update this, of course. But we saw in the latest results a 16% drop in the import of goods and services. US still has a negative trade deficit. That's okay. It just means we consume. We need to keep an eye on it, of course. It doesn't get out of hand. But what we've seen, which is very telling, is that decline, which was driven, of course, by the turmoil and the turbulence of the tariffs. We are expecting in the next data to see a spike in that, because then remember, there was the pause. The pause was put in place. Inventory is being restocked during that pause, taking advantage of the grace period. So we're expecting to see it go up. What happens after July the 9th is obviously a mystery. We're going to have to wait and see on what's announced, but it will have an impact for sure on the US trade deficit.
Yeah, definitely.
So Yeah, cost pressures. I was just going to quickly go through this before the next one, Craig.
Sure.
So, we listen to our customers and our partners. We're all over the place meeting them. Some of the guys are in Crush. As Craig mentioned, we were in Rome last week, and I'm in the UK this week. So we're listening, and we're seeing the same. You could put it into sort of 4 buckets. Rising costs, obviously, that's not a surprise. We've known that for 3 months. Rising costs and price hikes. So importers, manufacturers who are dependent upon commodities coming into the country to then finally construct or to resell their products, they're facing price hikes. Okay, supply chains. We talk about tariff engineering. We are seeing customers being strategic now about where they get their commodities, their widgets, their raw materials, whatever it may be, because if another country is offering the same commodity to the same standard, it can legally avoid importing from that high tariff country and switch their supplier to a lower tariff company and still fulfill their promise to the customers in terms of assembly of product and sale of the goods. So that's strategic tariff engineering, and we're seeing customers do that, also optimizing their supply chains. We reported as well over the last couple of weeks that the layoffs and the restructuring, Volvo, I think, was one that we put up. 3,000 jobs were impacted because of layoffs and restructuring. So companies that are heavily dependent upon importing raw materials, widgets, whatever it may be, into the US are finding it now too hard to do. And subsequently, the work has dried up. So, and therefore you have the layoffs and the restructuring. So that's a real impact. And then, of course, cash flow and margin compression. So you're paying more for the goods that you import, and then when you're reselling them, you're not getting you have to put your prices up. If people are buying them, then you've got a cash flow problem immediately right there. So those are the 4 buckets, Craig, that we sort of tend to put things in. Perhaps we'll move on to sort of the latest sort of reaction we've seen from the markets.
Yeah. So, oops, I think we went one too far here. There we go. So, businesses are reacting to this tariff turmoil. The 30% of the goods on Amazon's platform are from China. So that'll really we'll see what happens with Prime Day, right? That's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah.
Retail sales have dropped almost a percentage point, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it actually is quite a bit in number terms. You can read the rest of the stats there. There's a lot of supply chain impacts going on. Interestingly, the NCBFAA, which is the National Customs Broker and Freight Forwarders Association, sent a letter to the Trump administration, basically saying that, and they represent a bunch of state and national level trade groups as well, warning that the supply chain disruptions are going to have a massive impact on the economy. And they're actually calling for the White House to implement a White House supply chain disruption task force, which was last seen during the COVID-19 pandemic, to actually address all of these supply chain disruptions. Like we've seen empty cargo containers going back, cargo shipping prices, container shipping prices have gone up. You can see that increase there, 58%. All of these disruptions are rippling through supply chains right now. So, and industry trade groups such as NCBFA, there's others, are reacting, and they're trying to get the message to the Trump administration that they need some certainty. This is really about the whiplash that we talked about earlier, like the back and forth. That's really what's got folks, I think, questioning, what's going to happen next. So
just
why don't we
one point
talk
on this one? Yeah,
sorry,
sure. Craig. That 54. So Allianz, the insurer, the giant insurer, they surveyed a whole lot of companies, and over half, 54%, you can see there, bottom left. They're going to have to increase their prices to accommodate the cost of tariffs. That's very similar to what we've been seeing on the polls, Craig. That above 50%, realizing that that's what we're going to have to do. Another trend I've come across is I think this is a fair approach as well, actually. Importers in the US are reaching out to their suppliers saying, look, this is not just an us problem. This is a you problem as well. Can you meet us in the middle on cost here? because we can't be shouldering all of these tariffs and then be expected to sell on these goods in the US. So how about you look at your cost base and see what you can shave off and meet us halfway on this increase, so we share the burden. So I think you're seeing better collaboration between buyers and sellers overseas, in order to supply the US market, which is still consuming day in, day out. It's consuming, but to share that that financial responsibility.
Yeah, and that's a good segue to the next slide, which is, what are the steps that a company can take, or what we're seeing in terms of discussing with companies and partners what they and their customers are seeing. Number one probably is a diversification of shipping carriers, sources of supply, localizing supply, changing suppliers to other countries that aren't as impacted by the tariffs. Using automation tools such as ours to try to lower the impact of the tariffs, because we keep everything up to date, so you don't have to. All our trade content is up to the minute, so you don't have to think about it. Working with your customs broker, although very knowledgeable folks, I would caution though that they are overwhelmed right now. Having been at their trade show, the NCBFAA recently, they're, not to put too fine a point on it, but I think a lot of them are pulling their hair out just trying to keep up with all the changes. As we mentioned on the quote unquote four horsemen, ensure your product details are compliant. Make sure your HS codes are right. Make sure your country of origin is not misdeclared. Your declared value is correct. So, make sure you've got your I's dotted and your T's crossed. And then the other things we've seen are folks just building inventory to try to absorb the headwinds. A lot of larger companies certainly did that, that had the supply chain flexibility to try to build up inventory to absorb the tariffs. So our next poll question is just to ask you what you're doing. Are you diversifying? Are you switching to local suppliers? Are you investing? You can, by the way, select multiple of these. Are you investing in new trade technologies, rethinking your distribution strategies, other options that we haven't thought of or you don't know yet? So if you could take a moment to answer that would be very helpful. And again, you can select multiple. All right, a couple more seconds and we'll flip over. All right. Yeah, I don't know yet. It's so interesting. It's consistent with what we're hearing at Crush. There's just a lot of uncertainty in the market. And the other two, this is very consistent with past webinars. I think I've lost count now. I think we're at webinar number 20, or we're in the 20s anyway. This is what we see. We see that diversification or switching to local, and I don't know yet are the two biggest responses. All right, let's switch gears to asking what you are planning to do as a result of the increased tariffs. Are you planning to pass them on to your customers? Are you putting a tariff surcharge on your goods? Are you trying to absorb the costs, or is there another strategy you have? Again, you can select multiple here, and we actually do track this from week to week. So we'll show you what other participants in previous webinars have answered. So let's flip over to that now. Yeah, again, this is consistent with what we've seen in the past, isn't it, Patrick? So 60% passing the costs on to customers. That's continuing to rise. Let's go to the poll results here. Yeah, so you can see that the 60% is it was down in the 50s, but it's in the last few, it's gone up to 60. Including a tariff surcharge was a little lower this time around, but again, the overwhelming majority are including a tariff surcharge or passing the cost on. Absorbing the cost this time was under 20%, which it's been kind of banging around in that range, but that is the story. Is most companies are choosing to pass the cost on to customers.
Maybe we add for the next one. The next poll, we add are you meeting with your suppliers to go halfway on these increases? In other words, are you pushing back the burden or part of the burden of the tariff back to the supplier to reduce their cost base? So maybe we'll add that one.
Yeah, that's a great thought, because we're starting to see some sort of definite strategies in terms of what folks are doing. So I think that's a good call out. So what can folks do, Patrick, to keep up with these changes?
Yeah, so you're not alone. That's the first thing I'll point out. You're having to react. You're having to change. There's meetings all over the US, all over the world, tackling board level meetings on how they're going to tackle this challenge. And one thing's for sure, point number one is you don't want penalties and you don't want fines. You saw Craig presented what the CBP have been posting. Interestingly, they're posting it on LinkedIn. Why? Because all the professionals, industry professionals, use LinkedIn, so they really want to get the message out to C-level that you're on the hook here. Okay, if you're not compliant. So penalties, fines, loss of license, seizure of goods, all those things that Craig went through, they are real. And the only way you can avoid it is by being compliant. HS codes, declared value of your goods and the country of origin. You've got to be compliant with those. When it comes to paying duty, you don't want to pay too much. You don't want to pay too little. If you're paying too much, then you're pricing your product out of the market. If you're paying too little, then you're evading. Okay, it goes back to the CBP point. So you need to get your duties and taxes bang on. You're not a penny more, not a penny less. It's got to be bang on. And of course, our software helps you do that. You can calculate preemptively. You can calculate your duties before it actually hits the shores of the US, so you know exactly what's coming out of your bank account when you have to settle up with CBP. And then the third one, of course, get out any of that wrong duties, incorrect classifications, incorrect country of origin, incorrect declared goods, that is going to lead to supply chain delays. And delays, as we all know, is cost, whether it's a direct cost of service recovery to get that product to the right place after it's been sat around in a warehouse at CBP warehouse for a week, or whether it's indirect loss of revenue opportunity. The sale didn't go through, you didn't meet your contract delivery dates, whatever it may be. So there's costs associated with not being compliant. So work upstream, get it right before it leaves the shores of the origin country. So when it gets here to the US, it will sail through. CBP don't want warehouses full of shipments. They don't. They want things to sail through compliantly, like any entry point in any country. So the more you can do up front, and the more you can put yourself into that fast track, frictionless clearance, the better.
Yeah, I think that's right. And, the CBP is trying to help. I think that's why they're posting on LinkedIn, because they are trying to give you warnings. They're putting stuff out there. If you're not following the CBP on LinkedIn, I would encourage you to do so. They post a lot of very valuable information that I think, we can't cover it all here, obviously. But every day they're posting something of interest. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that. So how can you take action with Avalara? We have a number of different tools available. We have calculation tools, so we can implement and have a variety of different ways you can use our cross-border calculator. So this is calculating duties and taxes either on platform or within your existing systems. We have connections to most of the major ERPs and commerce systems. So we have calculators, we have tariff code classification tools. We have a number of different tariff code classification tools. We're going to show you a demo of one of those in a second. But we have tariff code classification tools that are fully automated, that you can drive yourself, which is the demo we're going to show you, or where we actually can do the tariff code classifications for you, full classifications. And then lastly, trade restrictions management. We can detect what goods are legal to import into different countries and what you have to be aware of in terms of restrictions for the goods that you're trying to ship into different countries. So we have a variety of different tools. We are going to show you a demo of one of them. This is our self-serve classification tool, just to give you a sense of what goes on. So if you could roll that clip, please, Regina, we would appreciate it.
Welcome to the Avalara Tariff Content Classification Tool demo. Click to learn how this tool can accurately classify your products. First, choose the country of import. In our example, we will use the US. Click to proceed. Next, select the country of origin. In our example, we will use China. Click to proceed. Next, let's describe our product. Click to proceed. Now, we are ready to classify. Click to proceed. The tariff classification tool needs to know a few more details. Click to select the upper material. Select the lower material. Click to proceed. We've now reached an HS. Click to drill down to reach the HS10. Since our product is a men's golf shoe, click to drill down. Since our product is not welt footwear, click to drill down. We have reached the HS8. Click to find the HS10. We have now reached our HS10. Click to see rate description. Here we can see the total duty amount for this product. This totals 28.5% general rate plus 125% punitive rate, which equals 153.5%. This concludes the demo.
All right. I'm sure many of you have recognized that the final rate for China was incorrect. We have to re-record that demo. We are aware of that. But it just gives you a sense of how the tool doesn't say that now. It gives the correct tariff, but it gives you a sense of how it works. Anyway, we are offering a 14-day limited free trial for that tool. There's some, caveats on it, but it gives you full access to the tool for 14 days, 3 destination countries, unlimited countries of origin. You can do 30 unique HS and tariff code classifications. So it gives you a sense of how the tool works. If you would like to take advantage of that, we're going to go to a poll question next, which allows you to tell us whether or not you would like to have a 14-day free trial of that tool. I believe, Patrick, does it start the week after? I think it takes us a couple of days to get it set up, yeah?
Yeah, raise your hand now, and then you'll be contacted. And remember, there's no obligation, there's nothing to sign, there's no commitment to be made. You just get 14 days, and it starts the following Monday. So raising your hand today will allow you to make use of the tool as of next Monday onwards. Yeah,
that's a good point. There is no obligation, obviously. So we'll continue from there. Next, if you would also, or rather, talk to one of our global trade experts, we can put you in touch with someone. All you have to do is just let us know if you want someone to contact you to talk about your unique circumstances. We can make that happen as well. All right, I'll just leave it on here, and then we'll just get into. There's not a lot of Q&A. Actually, I think I've confused everyone, haven't I, by telling them who to follow on LinkedIn. I see a bunch of questions about who was it on LinkedIn that I told you to follow. It's the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency. So again, that's U.S. Customs and Border Protection, otherwise known as CBP. You can look them up on LinkedIn. If you follow them, you'll see all of their posts around, what they're doing and what they're seeing, and helpful hints and tips and things like that. So again, I'd encourage you to follow the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency. Another question, actually not a question, from Jenna.
Good observation. Yeah. No, I was just from Jenna on the burden of steel imported into the US. So now you're declaring that on your entries, you're declaring that as 2 lines, one for the raw materials and the other the market value of the steel. So so that should relieve. It's not 50% on everything. If there's a bit of finished goods in there, then obviously a different tariff will apply to it, whatever that finished good is. But then the steel, the actual steel, that has the 50%. So in some cases where there's a combination of raw material and finished goods, then that could help. That could help you. So thank you for the observation. We appreciate that, Jenna.
Yeah, and obviously, there's so much nuance to all this stuff, and Jenna made a good point there. We can't cover all of it. There's so many details inside of some of these tariffs, and that is why again, we'd encourage you to use tools that are available. It doesn't have to be ours, but I think there are tools out there that can really help you, so you don't have to figure all this stuff out yourself, because it is very, very complicated. There's, the stacking. There was stacking of tariffs. Tariffs have been unstacked. There's a lot of complications. So I would, we'll try to cover as much as we can in these webinars, but obviously time is limited. So, if you post, yeah, go ahead, Patrick.
I'm going to pick up on Jennifer's question here. Small number of products. So, Jennifer, you're not thinking I'm going to make full use of this tool. What I would say, though, is we have different tiers. So you can buy classifications and the associated duty rates from as low as 250 transactions. Okay. And that'll be for a year. That'll be for a 1 year period. So it is, I suppose, forward thinking to get that, even if it's the lowest tier, to get a subscription for a year, because who knows what's we can see what's changed in the last 3 months. So over the next 12 months, who knows what's going to change? The product and the information that you get today from the tool may be out of date next week, or a month from now, or 6 months from now. So the biggest, what I see when I speak to customers, the biggest problem they've got is locking in HS codes and duty rates from 5 years ago, believing them still to be correct today, and being very surprised when they find out it's not correct, because these things get refreshed. HS codes get refreshed. Some HS codes get sunset. Brand new HS codes and descriptions are introduced, and therefore the duty associated with that HS code changes. So it's not a suggested practice to do it once, put it into a spreadsheet, save it on the office drives, and then refer to it forever, because things change, and that's the point of the software. We keep on top of the content, so you don't have to, and you can see when things change as and when it occurs.
Yeah, that's a good point. And we have another question from Dimitri. We manufacture footwear in China, and we're seeing 16% Section 301 tariffs, right, rather than the 25% that you had in your slide. Yeah, the Section 301s are variable, right? So Section 301 actually varies between, I believe it's like 17% and, or maybe, sorry, 7.5% and almost 100%. That's the underlying tariff, don't forget. So the underlying 301 tariff plus the fentanyl tariff plus the 10% is how you sort of add them up. Again, this is why, understanding how things stack is important. So, and again, we can't go into all the really granular details of every specific type of good, but Dimitri's exactly right. So the underlying 301 tariff is what starts the ball rolling, I guess you could say, and then you add the punitive tariffs and the base tariffs. So that is different depending on the type of good you have. Great question from Brittany. Can shipping DDP be a cost-saving option? Absolutely. So for those of you who don't know what DDP is, that's shipping delivery duty paid, meaning you collect the duties and taxes from your customer upfront during checkout. There's no surprises at the door when you ship the good. That is definitely a cost-saving option, because you can work with your carrier and negotiate freight rates. You get the duty and tax bills. We have calculators that can help you do DDP. So again, if you want to get in touch with us, I'd encourage you to do so. We can help you out with DDP if that's something you want to do. All right. Unfortunately, we are out of time. These things always go. I'm always amazed at how time flies here. We do have a lot of resources that you can take advantage of. You will get a copy of this after the fact, so don't worry that you can't click on any of these links. The copy that you get after the fact will have links that you can click on. We have a lot of great resources that can help keep you up to date beyond just these webinars. You can also sign up for the upcoming webinars, which I think Regina will take you through. But that is it for us. We look forward to our next webinar on July 9th, when we will find out what happens. Take care, everyone.
Yep. Actually, that is July 10th, and I will.
Sorry, July 10th.
I'll bring us to that slide right now. So we do have some upcoming webinars. You can check them out at avalara.com/webinars. And just to note, our 7/10, that is a Thursday, the special Thursday edition of Trade and Tariff Tuesdays. Registration will be up shortly. We do expect that tomorrow. So please check back on the site, and you can get registered sometime coming up very soon. So as Craig said, we're out of time. It goes by so quickly. So I'll just take us out by reminding you that you will receive the email later on today with links and resources. And then also it will include something about the demo. So thank you again for joining us, and we hope to see you on July 10th.